And we are live once again on the Epicenter. It's been a little break, but I'm so excited to be back here. And for today, season 2, episode 2, we have an amazing guest on Epicenter. But just in case you guys wonder, what is the Epicenter? It's basically a series of in-depth interviews that we have with renowned business leaders and industry influencers that are shaping the digital economy. And so without further ado, I want to bring up on stage Sheila Paul. Hi, Sheila, how are you?
Hi, Ronen. I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
I'm pretty good, I guess. It's great to see you again. Yeah, thank you
I'm
for taking the time out of your schedule to do this today.
Thank you so much for inviting. I really love the folks at Apps Flyer, and I wish we could see each other in person, but yeah, this is the next best thing, I guess.
This is the next best thing, and I promise that when we can do this in person, we'll do the same. But for those of you in the audience who don't know Sheila, she's a CMO of Home Credit. But I think for the benefit of the wider audience, tell us a little bit about Home Credit, and tell us a little bit, of course, about how it became a very strong consumer digital brand in the Philippines over the past few months, few years. Give us the rundown.
Sure. I'll give you like the bird's eye view. So Home Credit actually started in the Philippines around 2013. So we're gonna be celebrating our 8th anniversary this October in the Philippines, but globally, it's around in about 10 markets, and the maybe it's been around for about 20 plus years, really trying to provide consumer financing for the unbanked or underserved segment. So that's in a nutshell what Home Credit does. We've been working in the emerging markets for the past, more than 10 years, like I mentioned, 7 years in the Philippines. And originally, we actually dove into the market and started offering loans for people who were buying gadgets. So mostly mobile phones and tablets. If you walk into a store and you don't really have any banking or credit history or any credit card, you usually have to fork out cash to buy something. But Home Credit gave a facility or a service to people to put products on installment. Even if you had no credit history and you worked with us, we've got it down to a 1-minute approval for your loan. You can pay in about 6 to 9 to 18 to 24 months installments. That's pretty much how we started. We kind of blanketed like all these point of sale retail outlets in the Philippines. Right now, we're available in over 10,000 outlets around the Philippines. And we've transitioned that from being an offline retail service in the past year to becoming a more digitally mobile driven service. And we have grown a lot more products on top of that baseline foundation that we created of gadget financing. So maybe we'll talk about it a little more later, what other products we have for our
Yeah,
customers.
that's amazing. I mean, to get a loan approved in 1 minute is unthinkable, but only thinkable in the digital world, right? And so, if we compare like to, let's say, the neighbors in across APAC region, why do you think it's taken so long for the Philippines to truly become a robust fintech marketplace?
Yeah, so I think there are two factors, right? Both the fin and the tech side. So
Yes.
on the tech side, I would say it was really I guess everyone has talked about this, the slow growth of internet penetration and internet speed in the Philippines. Even, Ronan, we met, I was still in streaming back then, like more than 6 years ago. It was really a
Right.
challenge to get people to use any kind of internet service because data was still, mobile data was still very expensive. Internet, even broadband internet penetration was still quite small, like as much as 7, 8 years ago. But over the last year, obviously, because it was really absolutely necessary to happen. This is like, it's advanced a lot in the past few years. And then the fin side is also important, I think, because people have had a very low banking need maybe in the Philippines. In fact, in the 2019 survey done by our own central bank, it's only you know uh, about 27% of adult Filipinos have a bank account. And in terms of trust level, it's like more less than 10% of people trust digital financial tools. And this was back in 2019, but obviously a lot of things have changed over the last year out of necessity. And I think that's the reason that you feel this, what you call a boom moment, right, in the Philippines in terms of fintech. Those two factors have finally caught up.
Wow, and if we talk about the boom factor, so I peered into the crystal ball, and I looked at some data from a report that we produced just recently from Q4 last year until now. Philippines rose up to actually become 6th globally in terms of finance app installs, right? So that's people actually putting, these fintech apps on their mobile devices. What do you think triggered this, fintech boom?
Yeah. So definitely one of the factors is the growth rates. We were probably coming from like this small to like this big, in terms of a short period of time. And I think also probably we have to see the ecosystem of fintech itself in the Philippines. So of course you have the number one, I guess, fastest growing now, or maybe most used would be the e-wallets. Which were not really, I mean, they were there before the pandemic, but now they're super heavily in use because a lot of the government and private actually deployed salaries. They deployed the what we call the social amelioration or the assistance in terms of through the pandemic for people who didn't have jobs. It kind of created this whole money flowing system, in terms of the digital ecosystem. So that's one
Like
factor.
priming the well. You got to
Yeah,
have
yes,
the money
exactly.
flowing.
Yeah. And then second, of course, are the banks, the bank sector. We were all used to going to the banks to queue and do our transactions. But now I don't think I've stepped into a bank in the past year or so. And really, the banks, despite the fact that they were doing okay before this, they really took this as an opportunity to level up, the digitization of their services. And I think one key factor also was really the approval of the regulators in terms of the transfer, being able to transfer. So you have
Mhm.
stuff like InstaPay, PesoNet, that allows you to transfer from bank to bank, from bank to e-wallet, from e-wallet to payments, etc. And this used to be a closed environment. You could only like transfer from one of your bank accounts to another of your bank accounts. And now you can transfer to pretty much anywhere, including your Grab wallet, including um, like a home credit. You can pay also using these types of services. So that really grew the ecosystem. And then, of course, where we belong is the financing or the credit space. Actually, in here, I think I have to say that really home credit has been a very dominant force. I mean, from the offline part now to the being a digital, we are pretty much the market leader in the financial or credit lending space, especially for this sector, the unbanked. But we are also kind of playing a catch-up game with ourselves. Like we have to keep on improving it. I mean, what we're delivering right now is what I feel would be the early stages, and we are need to continue evolving as well. And probably that's the reason that you see a lot this fintech boom. All the digital players, whether you're one who's transforming from what you used to be, or
Mhm.
what or an introduction or a level up into new features, etc. That's what's really propelling this movement.
Right. And since we've mentioned the word boom and fintech boom a couple of times, I mean, you guys seem like you are at the epicenter of probably one of the most robust um, countries and at the right time in the right place. But how do you guys was there any kind of drastic moves that you guys had to do in order to achieve this growth and get to the market share level that you guys are at currently?
I think that the market share part, it was already there when we went in, probably because there's not a lot of folks who has a robust risk and credit scoring system as we have. Like I told you, the 1 minute approval, not any competitor can really claim this, even among the traditional or the new and up and coming ones. That's still something unique for us. I think one of the probably drastic moves we had to do was really to refocus our attention into the mobile app ecosystem. This was something we were building even before the pandemic, but in a kind of, let's do, I can see a roadmap between 3 to 5 years for rolling
Yeah.
this out. And meanwhile, we were still very much heavily reliant on our retail network. If you are a Filipino and you walked into a mall or everything, you see these ladies and gentlemen in these red shirts at our home credit, and that's very ubiquitous across all these retail points. But obviously that doesn't work now. The malls are closed, they're at 50% capacity. People don't really want to go out and window shop. Well, we shouldn't be going out and window shopping anymore. So really refocusing our attention to making our mobile app more dynamic and useful to our customers, in terms of extending credit, was really one of the big changes I think that we seriously made. Now we're really placing a lot of bets into the mobile app first.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I mean, you mentioned earlier that we probably haven't had to walk into a bank, and nor did we want to walk into a bank in the past 12 months. And how the mobile app has really enabled this to happen, right? I mean, if imagine if the situation that we are in right now had happened at another time, a couple years earlier, we would have been financially distraught, right? How do we pay for things? And so I think, if we just look at that, and it's like this intersection of technology and consumer consumption just kind of happening just like at the same time, right? And there's always like a hot button conversation about industry regulation, right? Because when things are moving as quick as they are, right, what are your thoughts on this, and really the future of home credit, and the fintech ecosystem at large, and what you can share with us?
So definitely, I think this is one of the organizations I work for that really interacts and works with regulators. In fact, we're like triple regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, that's the central bank, and of course the National Privacy Commission. But I can already understand, seeing what's happening in the market, why this needs to be the case. Definitely, people have gotten a lot more. I mean, this is like a view from a customer, but people have gotten a lot more creative in terms of, doing a lot of frauds and scams. You can see one every day happening, and they're getting much more unique. And you see, actually, probably us, in the Philippines. I don't know if this is being done in Thailand or anything, but we're writing our names and our personal information on every piece of paper whenever we enter every place. So you can imagine that there's a lot of this information floating around that is subject to frauds,
Anyone
etc.
can.
Yes, exactly. So definitely having guidelines or rules in place to protect the people, from their information being abused is really important. And then the second thing also is, because this is a time where people are really challenged with their financial situation. You do have people coming in and being abusive in terms of offering loans that have kind of way too high rates, and also those that are kind of fly by night. It seems to be quite easy, I think, to build an app and launch it into the market. I mean, like a few years ago, maybe in 2019, the SEC had shut down 800 of these, online lending apps that weren't really following regulation or anything. So, I mean, for a cleanup and to have a safety for the customers, then definitely the regulators need to work with us on that. And now that, especially being transforming into a digital process, then we also need to have some guardians of that. So what we're trying to do is definitely have an open discussion and relationship with our regulators, and try to co-create some policies with them, along, of course, with the other financial organizations and companies. And so hopefully that will be, I mean, at the end of the day, better for the customer.
That's great. And so, since Sheila, you're a marketer at heart, I believe, or what, like, let's say there's an aspiring fintech startup out there that is, just wanting to hear a piece of advice from you on, how to grow successfully in whether it's during COVID or post-COVID times. Like, maybe you can give like one or two nuggets of advice to them.
I think that having been a marketer through different types of tech startups, so not only fintech, but there was also gaming tech, and then there was also video. I think at the end of the day, what we can say is that we always have to look from the marketer's perspective at the consumer and what the need is and how we'll fill it. Sometimes, you have this like brilliant idea, and you get a bunch of engineers, working on it, thinking that yes, this is gonna work. um my actually the reason that for my being at all these tech companies is that I've always tried to translate it to like, can the customer understand what you're delivering? Are we overcomplicating things too much? And definitely actually in the last few years, agile development has really helped in terms of making the need of the customer and what tech is delivering work hand in hand better. So as long as the tech startup or fintech startup can identify what customer need they're serving, and work towards that, rather than kind of get in love so much with the technology of things, I think it will really help them to be able to deliver something of value to the customers.
Absolutely, and I love to. I do a lot of mentoring. I also love to tell the mentees, like, answer a pain point from day one, right?
Yes, correct.
What's the problem that exists, and what are you trying to solve, right? And how are you solving it, right? But you got to start with why.
Yes.
Right, and then think how. So let's shift gears, because there's obviously something beyond fintech and in the Philippines, and that is in terms of women in leadership positions, right? And being a leader yourself, what is it that Philippines is doing correctly that other countries can learn? Because there's so much diversity and inclusion in the private sector. Like, why is Philippines really leading the way in this respect?
I think that actually I didn't even realize that this was the case until they started writing things about it, because I grew up in a household that was very, very much women run. Unfortunately, widows. Like, my mom was widowed early, my grandmother was widowed early, so it was a very, very female power. I have one sister, a very female powered household. And I realized later on that this was the case for many, many of the households in the Philippines. It's I would say we matriarchal society. The woman controls a lot of the things that happen at home. And this kind of then blended, of course, into strengthening the women in terms of education, as well as then it seemed easier for us to step into higher positions, etc. Admittedly, there's still some areas maybe that this is not really the case, but having seen how women have broken through in government, I mean, we've had two female presidents. And even within Home Credit, right? Actually, right now, the executive team is composed of like 50% women. But this wasn't the case like, a couple of years ago. Before, it used to be mostly guys, except for the CEO, and also dominated as well by Czech. But now it's kind of balanced between Filipino and women. And you can see a lot of the companies taking steps to also improve their blend, because then I think people have started to see, we're not saying as a feminist, for example, we're not saying not that it has to be all women, but if you
Right.
have the entire, the full perspective of and representative of your customer, if you get, not only women, not only men, you have the LGBT perspective, you have the different segments of the market perspective, then it just makes a much richer, experience in terms of business, running a company, delivering a product. I think that's probably, there's been some recognition on that aspect in the Philippines. and definitely driven also by the power of the women at home in the Philippines.
The world has much to learn from the Philippines in this respect as well. So thank you for sharing that. It really adds a lot of context, and really, I don't think there's any corner of government or corporate world that women haven't been in leadership positions, and you are another great case in point on that one. Actually, very few people know much about you, but I found it very interesting that you were a research scientist. You've worn many hats. You have an ad agency background. You've been in gaming. You've been in telco. You've been in broadcast media. You've been in entertainment streaming in a company that unfortunately didn't survive this pandemic, and now Home Credit, right? What drove you on this career path, and like what is your secret sauce?
Secret sauce. I guess it's always been I've always been interested in kind of what's trending or what's in pop culture. I have to say that even back when I was in university, like I used to be kind of a writer as well, and I always like to talk about what's in now in terms of like back in the day it was comics, sci-fi, or whatever, fashion, etc. So that curiosity kind of drove me to all these things. You mentioned actually the research scientist part. That was also kind of a surprising step for me, because I was coming from a commercial role in gaming into that. But it was interesting enough that it set a roadmap for me, because back then the telco I was working for, to Telenor, was delving to certain areas which to me was super alien. I mean, they were talking about financial inclusion, they were talking about the Internet of Things, social communities, gaming, streaming music, and this was back in 2007, right? So you're like, what the heck are these? I don't know what they are. But later on, I realized that having studied all those areas, then I actually saw the opportunities in each of the areas, and that's why, when they forecasted back in '07 that these areas would be big things, it became a reality like more than 10 years later. And I was able to at least participate in, the video streaming, boom, as well as now fintech and gaming. So for me, it's really about, exploring what's good now. And I think it keeps me young also. I keep on, saying to myself, I always have to know what's in now instead of getting fixated into, what happened 10 years ago, and that's my formula already forever. So I really love all these developments. It's keeping my brain cells active.
That is so awesome, and I think you're really a great example on how we reinvent ourselves across time, across the different industries. I just want to ask you some rapid fire questions. Are you up for it?
Sure.
Okay. So,
I'm
if you
scared.
weren't a marketer, what career would you have now?
If I were a marketer, I would have been a journalist / Discovery Channel travel show host.
Oh, cool. So if we talk about travel, what's the first destination you would go to once this whole crazy pandemic is over?
Gosh, I have an entire list, but probably since I was so impressed by the Tokyo Olympics, I'd love to go back to Japan again.
Oh, yeah, that was so awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And do you have a favorite author?
I have a lot of books I read. I'm super escapist. I don't really read any serious books, but if I were to say favorite author, it would be Neil Gaiman. I actually lined up for like 8 hours to get his signature once when he came to the Philippines to do a book signing.
Amazing. Well, I'm reading a book that is very interesting and in line with the times. It's called 1984 by George Orwell.
I've read that. Yes.
Yeah,
Another prediction of what's going to happen.
Exactly. So what's the best thing about the Philippines?
The beaches. I have to say that I lived once upon a time in Norway and in Malaysia. I thought I took our beaches for granted, but now I realize that they're so beautiful and awesome.
Yes. Well, I can't disagree with you that as I've self-exiled myself onto an island in Thailand. And who's the most badass person in history of tech?
Badass in tech. I guess I'll mention someone now who is like Elon Musk, maybe, because he's just so. Because you use the term badass, because there are some great minds in tech, but badass would be like this guy's just disrupting, everything. So I would put his name there.
Awesome. And my last question, who is the most inspiring living person to you?
I guess the most inspiring living person is surprising for some of the people who know that I'm not super religious, but I'm very impressed by the Pope, because he is rocking the boat in a very, an area or a space which is very hard to rock the boat with.
Amazing. Thank you, Sheila. This has been such an amazing time spent with you on the Epicenter. Thank you so much for your time once again. And judging by some of the comments that I'm reading, a lot of people are feeling inspired by you and also inspired by comments about the beach too. So
Okay. I hope to see you soon, someday in some beach somewhere, Ronan.
yeah, the next mama.
Yes, the next mama.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sheila.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.